Welcome everybody, I'm Emma Walcott and I'm your host today. This is the first Mishcon Academy digital session, a series of online events, videos and podcasts looking at the biggest issues faced by businesses and individuals today. Today we are discussing the developing cyber threats that COVID-19 poses to businesses and individuals. As a reputation lawyer, I'm particularly interested in how organisations and individuals, and indeed governments and countries, will be judged by their response to this unprecedented crisis situation, including how prepared they are for cyber attacks and malicious interruptions. I'm joined today by Joe Hancock, a partner and the head of cyber at MDR Cyber. Mark Tibbs is the director of the cyber intelligence team at MDR Cyber. Simon Lambe is the European Regional Risk and Security Officer for Compass Group. Guirakhoo is a threat research analyst at Digital Shadows. What are the cybersecurity challenges that businesses are facing from this rapid digital transformation in terms of remote working? And do you think that businesses are prepared to deal with cyber attacks remotely?
Thanks, Emma. I mean, we're in unusual times. Now, we've now all turned our businesses effectively inside out. Everyone who was in the office is at home. Every kind of service we can push out there is in the cloud, and everyone is now taking web conferencing much more seriously than they ever did before. And this presents some interesting kind of challenges. I mean, we're all seeing staffing issues at the moment across every business, especially, businesses who provide professional services. So we are starting to see a bit of a reduction in managed service provision. For example, if you outsource monitoring or detection capabilities, can that supplier at the moment really sustain those when their headcount is being reduced, and can you sustain that internally? But also there's now the move to these services that are spinning up everywhere. We've seen all the problems that Zoom has kind of publicly had in the last few weeks. The irony is not lost on me that we're all on a Zoom call. We've seen other video conference providers start to have issues. And this is only going to kind of continue. And actually, this stuff now pops up outside the protective bubble. So all of a sudden, we've gone from having a few shadow IT services, we call them, things that, we kind of knew people were using within the business. But now everyone in every business is probably using Zoom, WebEx Teams, Blue Jeans, House Party. Contemporary security strategy is all about rapid detection and effective response. And often we find that response for our clients often relies on having the right people in the office to be able to either get on a call or do something quite quickly. It's really difficult remotely. So we're starting to see organizations now think about, actually, do I really need forensic evidence for something, or do I just get the information that I can get to kind of prove that something's happened or not? We're seeing a lot more focus on remote forensics and remote incident response. So it's going to be interesting how both this kind of digital transformation happens to businesses, but also how we provide security services for the organizations we protect with less staff, less resources, and also do it all remotely.
Alex, I wondered if I could ask you, now people are spending more time at home behind screens. Is there more cybercrime across the board? With less supervision from schools and parents, are there more disruptive actors hacking just for the lols?
We saw cybercrime happen just immediately after the virus started making global headlines. And it started off with the typical things, phishing emails, misinformation, but more recently it's grown to also include the sale of fraudulent medical equipment and also more detailed scams. Cyber criminals have also been taking advantage of these communications platforms that are now being used more than they ever have before. So you have organizations like schools who don't have this ingrained remote work culture that have now had to scramble to come up with these solutions to, sustain their business while everyone is dealing with the fallout from the pandemic. One phenomenon that's pretty recent is Zoom bombing. So that's when, uninvited participants join a meeting to eavesdrop or share inappropriate material, just generally to wreak havoc. You have dedicated forums that have cropped up on the cybercriminal landscape, like Zoom Leaks, which is for people to join and share Zoom room codes for people to access, as well as the passwords needed for those rooms if they're private, and even more personal information, right? If they need a specific name that'll make them have a greater chance of being able to join undetected, those will also be shared there. So even though there's no overt criminal angle on this, it's pretty much, like you said, just for the lulz. There could be some more serious ramifications if this is applied for more sensitive meetings, sensitive government communications. There's definitely an espionage angle that could be extended to it as well.
Mark, I wonder, how have cyber criminals and fraudsters responded to the pandemic? What are the main problems you're seeing?
Well, they never let a good crisis go to waste, cyber criminals. So they have responded, as Alex said, really, really quickly. The ways that they've responded, so the ways that they are doing the attacks hasn't really changed, but the ways that they're trying to entice people to interact with things. So Alex mentioned phishing emails. We've seen sort of the World Health Organization and various different regional public health bodies, as well as tax bodies, being impersonated. But it started that way, offering information, click here, log in here to steal information and to infect people with malware. And it's increasingly becoming more about using lures that will entice people to click on them by using things such as loans, business loans, personal loans, because people's economic situations have changed. We're also starting to see business email compromise attacks. So this is when attackers are gaining access to email accounts and then diverting funds away to their own criminal accounts. They're starting to use the lure of COVID-19 as well. And I suppose what businesses will want to know is, what's next? We've started to see things like malicious apps that are also using the lures of COVID-19 as well. So the businesses will want to know, what's next around the corner, what can they expect? How can I tell my staff about what to look out for? Those kind of things.
Simon, so can I come to you now? So what are the unexpected effects on cybersecurity for UK business from the pandemic? Have there been any positive impacts? And do you think that there will be a lasting impact from the pandemic on security practices for businesses?
Hi, Emma. Thank you. So I think, first of all, companies are very much focusing on the availability over confidentiality and integrity of their systems. I think security teams are having to take a more pragmatic view of security risks. For an example, printing at home, again, the focus for the company is very, very much around the availability of their information. I think another piece we need to be careful of is the human impact of running campaigns such as phishing tests. We need to get the balance right between protecting our data and increasing the stress levels of very stressed employees already. I think there have been some positive impacts though on this. The amount of collaboration that we've seen across different companies has been really good. A great example of this is the MDR publication of the threat intelligence indicators and third-party security reports. From a lasting impact point of view, I think resourcing levels within the cybersecurity teams may be impacted by the current financial challenges. So I think the longer term view of being able to impact of the companies being able to manage their cyber risk will very much depend on the approach that companies are taking. Are they taking a short-term view of this or a longer-term view?
It is interesting, I think, that the gangs are seeming to respond to our activities and what we're focusing on now. One of the questions that's come in from our attendees, Leroy Stanford asks, have you seen more cyber attacks or spikes against online supermarkets? We were discussing earlier on whether there were particular industries that were now more susceptible, for example, online gaming. So are there trends in where attacks are being focused?
You definitely have people talking about ways to exploit, this increased internet traffic, right? You have more people doing business online. You have more people shopping online. So the downside of that is that it could be easier to conduct criminal activities. So things like hiding fraudulent transactions. If you're carding, say, a supermarket, then it could be easier to hide that fraudulent transaction in the wave of all of the new people that are now using these online shopping methods for their primary sources. Like you mentioned, online gambling could be an attractive target for this. You have a couple of services that aren't necessarily used to operating online now that now have an online presence. That could possibly have some security lapses associated with it. Things like streaming services, right? User credentials for those have been commonly shared, for the past couple of years and traded on cybercriminal forums. But because more people are now using these and often just sharing their accounts with friends and families, there's a danger that they could be used to access other accounts that those credentials are shared with.
Because we're seeing more people using these services that are critical now for their lives, the cyber criminals are really quick to respond to that, and I'm sure that we'll start to see that at some point soon. Streaming services, gambling, retail, those are all the things we kind of expect to see.
It's been interesting as we've been monitoring the kind of the threat intelligence landscape during the pandemic. So we saw, the first week or 2 weeks was, if you just look at domain registrations some of which we know to be malicious, it was everything was either COVID or Corona related. Now we've then seen this move towards then to start targeting video conferencing applications. So we see lots of registrations for, that are trying to look like Zoom domains, trying to look like WebEx. And I think if you kind of project that forwards, we'll see two things happen. We'll see services that people use at home, so online shopping, Amazon delivery services will probably be, I'd imagine, the next ones who the criminals will then move on to as the kind of, the lockdown starts to bed in and more people have time at home. The other thing I think will happen is people are now going to have more time on their hands. They're not going to be going out. So more people are going to gamble. More people are going to sign up for online services. More people are going to sign up for all sorts of websites. I think we'll see another round of credential leaks. So a whole load of people are going to have some more security problems. People's passwords will be lost. And then I think we'll see a rise in what we call credential stuffing attacks against these services. As the lockdown beds in, you'll see criminals start to target things that people are using every day. And also some more of these credentials will most probably become available.
Keith Donald asks, if you think the regulatory authorities could do more to prevent cybercrime, which one step would each of you like to see the regulators take? Good question.
I think that just more international cooperation would probably do a lot of good in this realm. If you have countries that are just going forward and taking the initiative to, take this on their own, others might follow suit. You have a lot of cooperation, with the FBI, other Five Eyes countries. And I just want to see that happen more and more frequently. And in terms of regulatory authorities, really cracking down on the roots of cybercrime would do a lot of good.
Security is still, unfortunately, viewed as a cost. It's viewed as an afterthought. We need both support and advice, but also a more punitive regime of regulation, I think, driving security change, as we have seen with data protection change.
If we look at sort of like financially motivated cybercrime, the biggest losses at the moment come from business email compromise. So my efforts would be working on a way to mandate two-factor authentication on cloud-based email, because that is the one thing that seems to be the biggest problem, and by default it tends to be off most providers.
We have a couple of minutes before the session's due to end. I just wanted to wrap up by asking each of the panelists for a final comment, just summarising what they want their key takeaways to be from this event.
I think my kind of two key takeaways are, first of all, just working out, how you're going to deliver the level of security you need with potentially less people. So having a bit of a think about, for an organisation, what do we do now to deliver the same security outcomes if certain things happen? How will we deal with them kind of now? And then, the second point, look how things are changing. It's becoming clearer what the look forward is. We can see some problems coming kind of around the corner. Now's a good time to start preparing for those.
The takeaway for me is very much that the world has not stood still when it comes to cyber criminals. And that links nextly to my second point, which is just education awareness, and just making sure that our user base really understands that the world has not stood still outside, and we still need to be worried about this as well as everything else at the moment.
Yeah, user awareness is probably one of the most important things I'd want to highlight for pretty much any organization in any sector, and not just for now, but in general. My second thing is to use this as a learning experience as well, right? It's rather unfortunate that this is what has prompted a lot of companies to rethink some of their policies regarding security, work from home policies and such. But try to figure out how you can apply that, in a post-COVID world. What are the main takeaways you can use from that?
Mine was also around employees, not letting them forget that security isn't just something that happens in the office. It's now something that happens at home as well. We're seeing, internally in our own business, we're making sure that people are aware of all the changing nature of cyber threats and what they can expect to see. So I think that's super important, is around educating staff. For businesses, focusing on the priorities to your threat model. So working out who the attackers are that are going to attack you. Has that changed because of the world changing? And apply those controls proportionately.
Thank you all to the audience for joining us today, to our speakers for their insight and their practical advice. For our latest guidance and online content related to COVID-19, you can visit the Mishcon Hub at mishcon.com/COVID-19. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a nice afternoon and stay safe.